One of the most wonderful things about music or any art form is that listeners and viewers get whatever they want from it. I listen to Alter Bridge and hear actual gods bestowing their melodic and sonic wholesomeness on the entirety of the planet, but everyone else in the office knows them as those guys that did Edge's theme song, and they couldn't care less. Point being, composing and interacting with music is what separates us from the majority of animals, and it's an intrinsically human quality to form a bond with certain bands, songs, and artists in general. From getting you through tough times to just being the perfect accompaniment to any random afternoon, of gaming in my case, that is the beauty of music. On the darker side of things though, people occasionally read into music in ways that weren't intended by the songwriters, with the results sometimes being utterly devastating. The following songs have all been accused either of purposefully encouraging violence or unintentionally resulting in murder. Obviously, none of this is okay, but it is fascinating to realize the power of music can affect people in so many different ways. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 songs that allegedly made people break the law. Also note that a lot of the instances described here are very dark, so be ready for that. Number 9, Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy has been criticized time and again by concerned parent groups who allege that his tunes contain hidden satanic messages, and that they cause 2 teenagers to take their own lives. But perhaps the biggest Ozzy-related controversy comes from Bark at the Moon. Inspired by the punchline to a joke that Ozzy used to tell frequently, the punchline and answer to life apparently being each and bark at the moon, Ozzy and guitarist Jake E. Lee wrote the song about a werewolf. For some reason though, 20-year-old Canadian James Jollymore felt a certain kinship with the Jekyll/Hyde character described in the lyrics. So much so that it inspired him to stab and kill a woman and her 2 sons on New Year's Eve in 1983. According to one of Jollymore's friends, Jimmy said that every time he listened to the song, he felt strange inside. The friend also claimed that hearing the song on New Year's Eve awoke the murderer within, and it was the main driving force behind these horrific crimes. Number 8, Exit by U2. When writing and composing The Joshua Tree, Bono was inspired to pen a song about serial killers, citing the influence of Norman Mailer's novel The Executioner's Song and Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. He said he considered it an interesting challenge to write a story in the mind of a killer and wanted a song with a sense of violence in it. Unfortunately, someone else would also be inspired by Bono's own creation, and not in such an innocently creative way. In 1991, Robert John Bardo told a courtroom full of his peers that Bono's attempt at crafting a story of a killer had inspired him to become one himself, as he'd murdered actress Rebecca Schaeffer. Bardo, who had become obsessed with Schaeffer a couple of years prior, paid a private investigator to find her home address. Bardo routinely stalked Schaeffer right up until he killed her in the doorway of her own apartment. U2's Exit was played during his trial, and Bardo mouthed the lyrics and drummed on his legs while it did, getting noticeably excited when the lyrics "pistol weighing heavy" came up. And that is just creepy as hell. Number 7, In the End by Linkin Park. When nu metal took over mainstream rock radio in the late 90s, it also inherited the unfortunate title of scapegoat for parents who looked to blame their children's villainous behavior on the music they were listening to. Most commonly, acts like Korn and Marilyn Manson were thrown to the wolves, citing many out-of-context lyrics as indictments against the musicians themselves. But surprisingly, it was the relatively pedestrian Linkin Park that would be condemned in 2001, when 15-year-old Charles Andrew Williams shot 15 of his high school classmates, killing 2 of them. Williams was moved around often by his family, and he was repeatedly bullied in school. Following the shooting, Williams' friends and family suggested it was this combination, along with some choice lyrics of his favorite nu metal group, that inspired him to go through with it. There were apparently 3 songs in particular that were singled out as the catalysts: Papercut, One Step Closer, and In the End. But one of Williams' closest friends narrowed it down even further, saying, "Listen to In the End, track 8 on Linkin Park's CD. That was the song that inspired Andy." The media pointed to lyrics, "I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end it doesn't really matter," as the jumping off point. While the band rightfully distanced themselves from any responsibility for the teens' actions, guitarist Brad Delson responded by saying, "There's a misconception that angry music is going to make someone angry. I think it's cathartic." Number 6, Jeremy by Pearl Jam. The grunge movement became the face of teenage angst and rebellion for the better part of a decade across the 90s. However, in 1996, 14-year-old Barry Lukatis misinterpreted one of the genre's most popular acts when he used a Pearl Jam music video as the influence for a mass shooting. Much like the subject of Jeremy, Barry was experiencing major family dysfunction leading up to the event. His parents had divorced, and his mother spoke frequently of her plans to commit suicide, all of which added to the stresses of high school, making him clinically depressed. Lukatis' attorney argued that the music video, which the real-life incident pretty closely resembled, may have incited Lukatis' rage and pushed him over the edge. Perhaps unrelated, Pearl Jam didn't release another music video for 6 years after Jeremy and the Trial. Singer Eddie Vedder has reasoned that music videos too frequently detract from the music itself, but you have to wonder if the situation with Lucatus didn't make him think twice. Number 5, Disaster Piece by Slipknot. Poor old Slipknot. You're probably not going to find a group of nicer people playing music that also sounds like it's coming directly from the most melodic parts of hell. And yet, in the face of controversy, like when 2 of their fans viciously stabbed a person to death while singing lyrics from one of the band's songs, nobody was talking about what good people Corey Taylor and his bandmates are. Then again, opening a song about bullying with the words "I want to slit your throat and f*** the wound" might rub some people the wrong way. These are allegedly the same lyrics Jason Harris and Amber Riley sang as they stabbed a man to death in 2003. According to detectives who interviewed the pair, they also listened to Slipknot's music before and after the murder was committed. As for the motive, all they could muster was that Harris was curious as to how it would feel to take someone else's life, and Riley had a strong urge to see a dead body. Yes, I did say that this video was going to be gross. Number 4, Ronnie by Metallica. One of my all-time favorite bands. Across Metallica's career, they've covered war, injustice, and occasionally love. But the sheer reach of their lyrics means that at some point, someone was going to take something the wrong way. In 2002, a 29-year-old New Jersey man called Ronald Patuch did just that when he killed his mother, who he was living with, then proceeded to rampage through the neighborhood, fatally stabbing an 11-year-old who rode by on his bike. Patuch was a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic who had missed taking his medication on that day, and long believed that the Metallica song Ronnie, which is allegedly about a school shooting that occurred in Washington, was actually written about and directed at himself. In court, Patuch's attorneys pointed to a specific set of lyrics that Ronald believed in his unmedicated state were instructions from singer and writer James Hetfield, including bits that described the song's subject as a boy who never laughed, never smiled, talked alone for miles and miles and miles, alongside the supposed endorsement that the children in his quiet town all fall down, down, down. Number 3, Gangster Life by South Central Cartel featuring Tupac. It might be surprising considering the number of gangster rap songs that detail people getting shot and murdered, but there really aren't that many instances of rap being directly related to real-life killings. That's not to say it never happens though. In 1994, 2 17-year-olds involved in the killing of a Milwaukee police officer claimed that they planned the execution-style murder with the use of a sniper rifle because certain passages of a Tupac verse had heavily influenced them. The quote-unquote trigger man Curtis Walker went so far as to say that Tupac's words kept repeating over and over in his mind the night that he shot the officer, and that they were part of his consciousness. And although he never specified the exact passages that kept running through his head, any number from Gangster Life could have fit. Number 2, Bodies by Drowning Pool. Just in case you haven't noticed a theme, let's go with troubled youth plus misinterpreted rock music equals horrifically terrible tragedy. Joshua Cook's story is another where this totally applies. Cook was 19 years old when he shot both of his parents multiple times with a 12-gauge shotgun. And while he pulled the trigger, he was listening to Drowning Pool's Bodies through his earphones. Although the song is actually about the mosh pits that would form at the band's concerts and the brotherhood that forms between those who participate, the repeated guttural refrain of "let the bodies hit the floor" has led many, like Cook, to misconstrue it as an ode to violence in general. It was also widely reported that Jared Loughner took inspiration from the same lyrics when he shot US Representative Gabriel Giffords and 18 others in 2011. In an attempt to shift the blame away from what he'd done, Cook and his attorney claimed that his actions were motivated by the Drowning Pool song Bodies, as well as the fantastical violence depicted in The Matrix. Said Cook, "I had been listening to the song for about a year non-stop, and I just knew that I had so much hate and rage inside of me that I knew it was leading to murder." In response, the band issued a statement that included a great comment. "Listening to Drowning Pool music does not make you a bad person, misleading people does." And number 1, Helter Skelter by the Beatles. Not only was Helter Skelter a huge influence in the development of what we now call heavy music, it was also the first to be linked as the inspiration for a major crime. Apparently, when Charles Manson heard the White Album, he thought several of the Beatles' songs were trying to warn him about an impending race war. To Manson, the Fab Four weren't just a talented group of musicians, they were the angels referenced in the Book of Revelation. Helter Skelter then was the medium through which they proclaimed the future of mankind. And that future evidently required Manson to start a race war by brutally murdering a number of white victims and attempting to pin these murders on the Black Panthers. This was intended to somehow trigger the apocalypse, a scenario that Manson lovingly termed Helter Skelter. Members of the Manson family even scrawled that phrase in blood at the scene of a killing. In response to such a twisted crime spree and his band's song being associated with it, John Lennon told Rolling Stone that Manson was misreading mysticism from the text. "I don't know what Helter Skelter has to do with knifing somebody, I've just listened to the words properly, it was just a noise." And that is my rundown of all sorts of different songs that allegedly drove people to kill. Let me know some stories down in the comments if you know them. I've been Scott from What Culture Music, and I'll catch you soon.